Hi, I'm Billy, and this is the Unlock Your Child's Full Potential podcast, where we discuss how to teach our children the lessons we wish we had learned earlier, the skills that will give them a head start in life. No one teaches you how to be a great mother, and unless you had a great mother to emulate, you have no idea what that even looks like. I believe that we all want to be the best moms and create an environment where our children can blossom into the best versions of themselves. And each of us has uncovered some part of that truth. Let's tap into the collective wisdom and inspire each other to become the moms our kids deserve us to be. Hi, Jessica. I'm honored to have you here as my guest on the show. I admire the work you do. Preteen and teen years can be really challenging for kids and their families. And having you on their side to unpack the tricky stuff is a blessing. You have a master's degree in social sciences, and you're the author of the award-winning books Best Friends Forever, or Not Really Friends, A Girl's Guide to Happy Friendships, and Middle School Safety Goggles Advice. I know you're focused on helping preteens and teens navigate friendships and the ups and downs of their social lives. How did you come to write about these topics? What inspired you to go in that direction?
Oh, great question. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to chat with you. So this was a new direction for me. I had a background in social sciences, but I also have two daughters. And when they, hit the preteen years, I noticed their lives and their social lives got more complicated. So for me, that piqued my curiosity. I was really interested on what was going on there. And it reminded me so much of what I was going through at that age. So, that got my wheels turning, which, what first started as a friendship program. So I ran a friendship program for kids, and it was in upper elementary school. And then most of the kids that showed up to that ended up being girls. And there was such great information that I learned there that grew into my first book, which you mentioned is called BFF or NRF, Not Really Friends, A Girl's Guide to Happy Friendships. So I started there, and then, my kids hit middle school, and I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting. So then, I started to research and write my second book, which grew out of time I spent in seventh grade classrooms, really just trying to understand middle school, and especially middle school today, what their kids are going through. And now with, everything moving online, that was the inspiration for my third book. I'm like, okay, now, so now kids' social lives in many ways, when they hit the preteen and especially teen years, have moved online. So I've just been following my curiosity really. Because being a preteen today is really interesting and complicated. It's much more complicated than when we were kids, and that's just a complicated age anyway. So there was no shortage of content and for things to meet, to explore.
Awesome. So they're geared towards girls, right? Exclusively.
Just the first one. And then the rest are, gender neutral. So just the first one, because, when I was running the friendship program, there were so many stories that were specific to girls that I wanted to share in that voice. However, the concepts in that book really apply to anybody, and not even just kids. So in my mind, I'm already thinking about, all right, I want to write another book about friendship, that applies to all genders. So I started there because there were some stories that were pretty girl specific that I wanted to tell in that voice.
Would you like to tell us one of these stories as a starting point?
Yeah. Sure. So, and the way I like to write, so I write for kids, and I like to make books really interactive and engaging because, when I was a kid, that's what I loved too. Quizzes and, stories and things like that, ways for kids to actually, see themselves in the book. So this book has it starts off with the quiz, how healthy is my friendship? And the next quiz is, how are my friendship skills? And all of those grew out of the friendship program I ran. But, I heard over and over stories. And one of the stories I heard was often, a friendship that doesn't really feel like a friendship. And that's actually what got me the title of the book, which is NRF, which I made that up, Not Really Friends. Because I actually really wanted to avoid some terms that we've got in our society, such as mean girls and all this. But I did want to acknowledge that sometimes we have friendships that don't actually feel like friendships.
Yeah,
so I'm like, okay, how can I talk about that, but not add like, mean girl or toxic or any of these words that sometimes get overused in our world. So I just like, okay, let's describe these as not really friends. That was a
I love
situation.
it.
Yeah, that's a situation I heard really often. In fact, that's what inspired the first quiz in the book, which is how healthy is my friendship? So we can take this quiz and we could say, oh, this friendship actually isn't behaving like a friendship. The way that we're behaving in this friendship is not really, full of friendship qualities. So just kind of shining a light on that, but also recognizing, the kids learn these skills at different phases in their life, and they're all coming from different backgrounds and different experience levels and, even neurodiversity. So, I come at this with, from a very like growth mindset that we're all learning these skills and we're all tend to be doing the best we can with the skills we got. So throughout all my books, I do encourage kids to keep an open mind because we're all growing and changing. So I don't want to throw labels on young people because that doesn't give them the chance to grow and change. And we all are growing and changing so much, especially in the preteen years.
Yeah. So why is middle school a tricky time for many kids?
And a lot of the things are, the same things we experienced. There are some of the changes in friendships and people trying on new personalities and new identities and the feeling of cliques. But what I find is helpful for parents to know as their kids enter this age is what's happening kind of underneath the surface is there's a really significant developmental change going on for kids. So, in their earlier years, so I'm going to say preschool through most of elementary school, not even all, but most of elementary school, friendships are based on play and proximity. So the kids come together and, the friendship might form based on games they're playing, or they might be neighbors. So they're nearby. There's our proximity. They might be in the same class. That forms the basis of the friendship. Now there's this shift that happens. And what makes it trickier is it's happening at a different stage for every kid. When they start to enter these preteen years, it's less about this play and proximity and becomes more about shared interests and levels of acceptance. So that's where we start to see this big shift in middle school, where all of a sudden these friendships that might have been based more on play, some kids have moved on and are way into this other thing. And so in middle school, there tends to be a lot of changes in friendship, which can feel hard and uncomfortable, especially at this time of life where kids are starting to put more weight into their friendships. They're individuating, trying to figure out who they are outside of their home. So they're individuating, and then all of a sudden, wait, who are my friends? And where do I fit? So it is this time of change. And for some kids, it's absolutely no problem. They just sail right through. For some kids, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. So we as parents can just come into this with a totally open mind. Their experience is likely going to be very different from ours. So let's not go into this with any, preconceived notions or stories, but just know that this transition is taking place. And it's a really important one developmentally, where they are kind of going from kid, but they're not quite, teen. So they're in this preteen stage where they're just really figuring it out.
How can we support them, in your opinion?
Good question. And so what I find is most helpful is, one, we can stay really grounded ourselves. So, when our kids walk in the door and they've had a really hard day or they're feeling really big emotions, what's really helpful is if we are this grounded space for them, so we don't go off on our own, emotional roller coaster just by hearing about their day. We are a really settled presence, which can be hard sometimes because they might share some really tough stuff. So, sometimes I have to just really take a deep breath and, just try to be as calming and opening my listening ear. So often at this age, especially, they might not want my advice. And chances are my advice is totally off base. So just really listening, showing some empathy. Sometimes the best thing I could say is, oh, that sounds really hard. Oh my gosh, that was tough. So just hearing them and making sure they're feeling heard, empathizing, and helping them manage those big emotions, letting them know they're okay. That of course I would feel that way, or you have every right to feel that way. So, validating that emotion, helping them figure out healthy ways to manage those big emotions, because if we think about it, what a gift if by the end of their teen years, we have helped our kids learn how to navigate uncomfortable emotions in healthy ways. That's a real gift that a lot of us, we weren't given that as kids.
Yeah, true.
There was a different approach, when I was growing up. So that's one thing that we can really help our kids know, is that this is a process and we all learn how to do this in our own way, but help them navigate those big emotions, and they're perfectly normal and they're perfectly real.
Yeah, they should know that it's normal and it's not something that they have to be scared of and hiding it.
Because then if they know that, and they know that you're a safe space to share that with, they're going to keep talking to you. As soon as we start reacting with big emotions, or as soon as we are telling them they shouldn't feel that way, they will stop. They'll stop coming.
In your book, you write about the friendship pyramid. What is that and why it's useful?
What I found, when I was working with kids, is sometimes it helps them to see the lay of the land, because they're right, they're right in the thick of it. And sometimes it helps to pull back a little bit to see the bigger picture. And we as adults learn this over the course of our lives. But when I share this with kids, they're like, it felt like a relief to them. So I'll give you a quick little visual of the friendship pyramid, but anybody can find it, on my website, or just a Google search. You could search friendship pyramid, Jessica Speer, and you'll find it. But picture like a triangle in your head, and at the very tippy top, we have close friends, and we know as adults that they're pretty rare. Those relationships that feel really close and safe and trusting. We're lucky if we have a couple of those. Kids can know that not every friendship is going to feel like that. That these are pretty special, and sometimes we even might have a period of time where we might not have that. And that doesn't feel so great, but that's okay too. If we moved, or entering a new school, or we've had a falling out with a friend, that can feel like a really vulnerable time, but it's something that happens to us. So knowing that those close friendships are just the tippy top of that pyramid, big part of that pyramid are just friends. And I am really loose with this term, because I think these days, with things happening online and things happening at school, and so for me, friends is pretty loose, and it could be neighbors. I mean, it could even be cousins and teammates and classmates and people that you just enjoy being around. But it hasn't developed that level of closeness or trust that we might have with our closer friends. But that's okay. There's a possibility that these friendships at some point might, but a lot of them won't. And that is perfectly fine. It's really important for kids to have lots of kids in that friend bucket. And again, it might not be super close, but they're people that they just enjoy being around most of the time, but far from perfect, because no friendship is perfect. And then at the base of the pyramid, I've got acquaintances, and these are all the kids that they might know, they not well, but they just see them across the school, or maybe they're on a different team, but keeping their eye out for future friends, so keeping that door open, because I think sometimes, especially in the preteen years, kids start to close themselves off. But keeping that open, that there are other people out there to meet, and you just never know. But then running up and down the pyramid is change. So it is possible to go from a close friend back to an acquaintance.
And that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. And so,
happen.
yeah, it's heartbreaking, and it's pretty normal. It's so uncomfortable though, and in middle school, it might feel so weird that someone you were so close with, now you're not at all. And that feels weird. So I want to acknowledge that, because it happens and it's uncomfortable, but it does happen. So, again, just shining a light on that, it's really common for friendships to change, and especially in these preteen years.
What would you advise a girl? Your daughter, for example, shares that her friend is not treating her the way she wants and needs her to. How would you advise her to proceed?
And I first, would go to her to get her thoughts on that, because often these social dynamics are more complex than I know. So I would first see how she's feeling in that relationship, and maybe try to get an understanding of, if it feels like she's not being treated well at all, maybe try to get an understanding of why she's staying in this relationship. What I have found, especially in these preteen years, is it can feel really threatening to just change. Some kids would rather stay in a not so great friendship than just feel like they don't have a wing person or a close friend. And so what I've seen over the years is that transition can take time. They have to make that move when they're ready. but I can, talk to my daughter about, what is it that's keeping you in this friendship, and maybe start to talk to her about who else she might feel comfortable sitting with sometimes. And, so just kind of opening the conversation and seeing where she is to try to get an understanding by that. But I think as parents, it is good to remind our kids of, what are the qualities of good friendships? And we can practice these too. How are we a good friend, and what are we looking for in friendships? And just keep talking that through with them, so they start to get some clarity in themselves as to what are they actually looking for in friendships. And sometimes when a relationship is ending is a great time for kids to reflect and figure out what they actually might be looking for, if they're looking for a new friend. So all of these times are just wonderful times of discovery. And sometimes it's just a matter of helping our kids figure out how to navigate conflict in healthy ways. I find that most of the time that's what's happening is, this relationship hits some sort of bump in the road, and I can try to help my kids and other kids navigate those in healthy ways. And what a great skill that is too, that takes time to develop.
Yeah, and might not even end a friendship, might be just a conflict to overcome.
Yeah, exactly. And so that is so common. I think sometimes at the adult level, maybe because of our past history, we might just want to burn that bridge. But what I encourage families to do, especially parents, is stay open to the change in these kids too. So now that I've got 2 teens, it's so fascinating to see kids that I knew when they were little and how different they are. So let's give kids the space, because there's a good chance that friendship might come back around, or they might have to sit next to each other in science class every day. So sometimes as parents, we think really black and white, but this is much more complex. Even if they really, really do not like someone, they might have to navigate being in the same classroom with them every day, or even being in the same friend group. So we can help our kids how to, navigate these complex dynamics.
That's a skill that they're going to need later in life too.
Pretty much all these things are skills, so it's going to take time. They're going to mess up, and other kids are going to mess up. That's what they're doing, is they're in the stage where they're learning all these really important social emotional skills, and it's a tough playground because everybody's at different stages too. And everybody has different approaches. That's what I've learned as a parent too, is, my approach might be so different from, another mom who might advise her daughter or son a different way. We all have different philosophies and values. Of course, it's complicated because there's a lot of things going on.
Okay, I'm hopping in for just a minute to tell you about the free resource I recently created. It's called the Connection Blueprint, and it consists of 5 tools that will help you improve the relationship with your child and create an environment where your kid feels seen, heard, and loved. After all the lessons we want to teach our kids require us to first have a trusting relationship with them, so that they're ready to hear our advice and lean on our support. Anytime I feel disconnected and out of sync with my own children, I get back to this blueprint, put the tools to practice, and it works wonders. I'm sure having a loving and trusting relationship with your kids is a top priority for you too. So check the show notes and get your copy of the Connection Blueprint. You mentioned in the book about 9 hidden friendship truths. What are some of these truths?
Yeah, and this, like the friendship pyramid, what I found with the friendship truths is these are things that we learn over the course of our lives, but it was helpful when I talked to kids about this earlier, because then it was, the light went off and they felt like, oh, okay, it's not just me. So one of the friendship truths is friendships have different phases and change over time. And of course they do. But, when you're 10 or when you're 13 or 7, those changes can feel abrupt and hard, so we can help our kids know that, friendship changes happen and it is normal. And they have different phases. We might be close with some friend, and then, the year might change, or we might get moved to a different class. We might not be close, but then we might circle back. So helping them know that is normal. That was a big relief to kids. Another friendship truth is, everyone makes mistakes. So especially in these years, they're all learning and growing. Everybody's got different skill sets. So everybody makes mistakes. Another friendship truth, just kind of talking about that close friend level of the friendship pyramid is, close friends hard to find. We talk about that. The close friends are hard to find. Not every friendship is going to feel like that. And that's okay, because close friends are hard to find. So just knowing that, that truth is just, it settles kids, and they don't feel like I'm the only one that doesn't have a BFF. That's not true. Chances are there's lots of kids who might not feel that way, even though it looks like they're surrounded by a group of friends. Do they feel like they have a close connection with those friends?
Yeah, and it goes around popularity in school and all the cliques, and these girls, that 5 or 6 girls go together, they're all best friends, and you're from the other girls that just has one best friend and can feel intimidating. In your research, what did you learn about popularity and cliques?
And this really begins, I see this like in upper elementary and in middle school, where kids start to use this term popular. Because I remember that too. There was the popular kids. And so I wanted to figure out what is that all about? And here's what's so interesting, and you could talk to your kids about. So there's different kinds of popularity. Kids tend to lump it all into this one term. There is different kinds of popularity. So there's one type of popularity where kids are actually well liked. They are leaders, and they know how to include others, and they're good listeners, and they feel more inclusive, and kids like being around them. So they're actually well liked. In middle school, this other popularity pops up where it's more about notoriety and power. So then
that's what I meant.
Yes. And so the interesting thing, and kids will know this, that type of popularity, they're not as well liked. In fact, some kids fear them. They're a little bit scary, because you just never know. They're not always behaving in pro-social ways. So there might be,
and you don't want to be on their bad side, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I found it helps to help kids unpack this. So when your kids come home talking about the popular groups, you can unpack that. Like, what is that? I know there's different kinds of popularity. What kind of popularity are we talking about here? Do kids actually really admire and like them, or are kids actually more afraid of this group, and it feels a little more exclusive, and there may be some mean undertones? So just helping them understand that dynamic instead of lumping it all together. Because what the research says too is, by the time you get to the end of high school, the more aggressive, popular in quotes group, that tends to fall away. But there are still the kids that are admired and well liked, just because they've got really great qualities as people. So just helping them understand this scene, it can feel really uncomfortable for kids, especially in middle school. They might feel like they're not part of this group. Some kids very much want to be part of this group and are trying to, so just, again, getting back to those questions as to, what are you looking for in friendship, and what kids have you met that actually have that quality? So getting it back to qualities instead of, status, trying to pull them away from status, which is hard, because who doesn't want to be seen and known by everybody, so it is hard to pull kids away from the drive to status, but, getting back to just qualities of friendship and relationships.
Great point. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that is interesting for researchers, and this is so helpful, especially for kids that might be a little more introverted, that some of the happiest kids have just 1 or 2 good friends, because the bigger the friendship group, the more likely that there's going to be conflict, and there's going to be kids in those groups that don't like each other, and there's going to be some, trickier dynamics. So studies have shown that the happiest kids have just a friend or 2. So, keep that in mind too. If your kid has a good friend, awesome. That could be the very best place for them. They have a good friend, and they're not maybe caught up in some of the dynamics of some larger groups.
But if something happens and you lose that friend and you have only one friend, that could be harder, right?
Yes. So it is great too to talk to kids about, they will know in their school that there's some, what I'm going to call floaters. So floaters just maintain like some friendships across the board, and, they might not even like totally hang out with some of these people, but they are friendly with some people, so that if your good friend is not there or that friendship changes, you have some other friends too, and that's just a great skill to think about being friendly and trying to cultivate, it doesn't have to be a close friendship, but just being friendly with maybe someone on a team or someone in a club, keeping those friendships out there too. So yeah, great point. So if you do have just one friend and that friendship ends, that is tricky, but again, not uncommon at all. A lot of kids experience that, but if they can watch these floaters in their school and notice how they do that, notice how they keep, a few friendships that they really like and stay connected with them.
So all that we talked about perfectly blends with the topic of your newly released book, the phone book. I think it's connected because wanting a cell phone is because we want to connect with our friends. It's still a tricky space, and forming healthy digital habits is another area where children and parents could use some help.
Yeah.
So tell me more about the book.
Yes. So the phone book, again, written for preteens, because I'm finding the kids are getting phones earlier and earlier. So right now, as of today, what I'm seeing is half of 11-year-olds have a smartphone, and that's kind of trending. I'm seeing that trend younger. So
I've seen it younger.
Yeah. And so some are much younger. And so there's a lot of conversations to have, with kids, because, phones, let's face it, if they are fully connected, so they've got an internet connection and, they're able to download social media, it is a window to the world. It's a window to a lot of content that is definitely not created for kids too. So I wanted to dive into all that, so what I tried to put in this book is, what are the things that I wanted my kids to know, when they got their first phones, but in a kid-friendly way. Like my other books, it's interactive, there's quizzes and there's activities. So hopefully it's fun. But getting back to your point on the social dynamics, so a lot of kids in middle school are on phones. That's complicated, but it's also complicated if you're the one without the phone too. So this is tough for families. Yeah.
Yes.
So I get the question is, what is the right age? And it really depends on your child and what is happening in your community, because it changes from school to school too. Like, what is the norm? If everything is going great, like their social world is fine, and they don't have a phone, I'm always like, delay. But if you get to a point where they are socially isolated, because when you get to middle school, kids, they are communicating via text or direct message. So if we're getting to a point where your child is actually getting socially isolated, it is time to maybe look at what might help them engage with their peers, because, that is the point where they really want to be engaging with their peers. And I wish that social media and your direct messaging wasn't the primary communication channel of preteens, but it is. And it is messy. We can see what happens in real life, in kids in their social world. So you take that and you put it in a group chat. It's not great. I talk about that in the book too. Like, what are the green lights? What are the red lights? What are the red flags? Because it is a complicated social world to navigate, especially for young people. We can think about us as adults. If someone doesn't return a text, it's hard not to think about, I wonder, why are they not returning this text? So now you think about a preteen brain and somebody not responding to a text or not responding to a direct message. There's a lot that goes through the preteen brain, or even, somebody responded in a certain way and they're thinking, are they mad? So there's a lot to it. This is a tricky time for kids. It's tricky because they want to be connected with their peers, and this is how their peers are communicating. But it's tough communication channels for young people to be navigating. So that's what I wanted to unpack in this book, plus other things like just stranger danger. And, knowing how big tech works and how these devices are designed to keep us scrolling. So I talk about all that, to hopefully help kids and families, navigate this whole world.
And this is a book kids should read before they get their first phone, right?
That would be my hope. So my hope is, and after's fine too. But what I found is kids, when they're on the verge of possibly getting their phone,
they're ready to read everything.
Yes, they will do whatever you say. So I'm like, okay, so in order to get this phone, first, we're going to come together and have our family tech agreement. There's great examples online. So come up with whatever you feel like is your starting point for a family tech agreement. knowing that's going to change. That is your starting point that you will revisit as they grow and mature. And then you could also be like, and we're going to read this book. You're going to read it and I'm going to read it too, because I want to make sure that we all are navigating these devices in the healthiest and safest ways that we can. The book is filled with all sorts of topics that families can talk about, because visiting a lot of middle schools, I hate to say it, but nudes happen in middle school. So you have to have that conversation before they hit that stage. So, it's much more common in high school, but almost every middle school I visited, it was a situation where the girl, they absolutely had no intention of this photo being shared beyond her, in quotes, boyfriend, but it gets shared and it's devastating for her. It's just, especially in those middle school years, just devastating. So, there is a little vignette in the book that talks about, in age-appropriate ways, that happening, making sure that you don't share things like that everything online is not private, just being aware that people can screenshot and share things at any time.
That's an awesome resource. Parents might not have thought of all of those things that you have to mention to your kid before they get in trouble. Kudos to you. I haven't bought first phone for my oldest one, so I'll definitely go through the book first. She's 9 and most of her friends already have a smartphone. And I was like, okay, I can buy you a regular phone for just calling and messaging without the connection to internet, but she didn't want one. That's the peer pressure. You have to have the smartphone already. It's not enough to be connected.
Kids might call those dumb phones, the dumb phone that doesn't have the ability to do everything. And some kids won't want that. It's like, it's either this or nothing, which is unfortunate because it makes it harder for parents to start slower, to start with something small and then grow into that. But how is that going for her peers and communication? Is she using your phone to text her friends, or how's that going?
No, she's not. She's not connecting with them at all, just in school. I don't see any side effects. I mean, no negative effects for now. So I'm
Good.
delaying.
Yes, that's what I always say. Yeah, if it's going fine, great, great, so that's good. And she's only 9, so they probably are not communicating a ton yet via text.
Yeah, but the fear of missing out is there because they have a Facebook group. There's a chat. I don't know what they're talking about, but still she's not there and she's left out. So there's that.
It is hard. It gets harder. I know, one of my kids was she just didn't actually want to get on TikTok, but she found when she hit high school, I have to do this because it's the pop culture that everyone is talking about. And if I'm not seeing and aware of this, I don't even know what these conversations are about. And I wasn't actually keeping her off. I was glad that she was delaying because she just knows, she's seen how addictive it is for her friends, how they have a hard time separating from that. So she delayed that on her own. But it's good to keep listening to what's happening in their peers, because a lot of this is about connection and relating, because so much is happening online that, they sometimes need to know what is happening on these platforms so they can actually be part of conversations at school.
Yeah, true. And I like that in the book, you don't focus exclusively on the dark side of technology, but you also emphasize that kids can make the world better with the powerful device in their hands.
Yes.
I like that.
There's lots of little stories, true stories about kids and teens doing really cool things. And since tech is here to stay, that's what I try to encourage kids to use it, because it's a powerful tool. So you have a lot of power in your hands to use this in positive ways. And it doesn't have to be changing the world. It could be something as simple as you see, somebody being treated badly online, just a quick text, hey, stop, not cool. So helping them think about little things they can do to make the online world better. So yes, there's some stories of really big, amazing things kids are doing, and also just little things, just being good digital citizens.
Oh, beautifully said. Yes. So Jessica, is there anything you would like to share that we haven't touched upon yet?
I just would share that this is a tough time to be a parent, because parenting has shifted so much, so childhood has shifted so much because of the influence of technology on our kids' lives. So we as parents are just trying to figure this out as best as we can. So I just encourage parents just to go easy on yourselves. We are truly navigating a transition right now and how kids are living their lives. there aren't easy answers, just keep doing your best, but know that it is hard. I know a lot of parents are struggling with this whole screen thing and how to navigate this. And it makes sense because it actually is new and there is no playbook out there. And so we are kind of making it up as we go along. And the good news is I've seen some legislation at the federal level, some things to help protect kids' privacy or things to make some of these technologies for kids a little less addictive. Things are happening, but slowly, because making laws and regulations is a very slow process, but things are happening. So my hope is that down the road, parents will have more resources in place to help their families put some better practices in place. But right now, we're all just doing the best we can. So yeah, go easy on yourself, parents.
And thank you for providing us a resource for that matter.
It was a joy to write and so helpful.
Please tell us about the phone book. Where can people find it? It's newly released, so it's already on Amazon.
It is available anywhere books are sold.
And where can listeners find you if they want to further connect with you?
The easiest place is my website, which is Jessica Speer, SP as in Peter, EER.com. And there I've got a lot of resources on a lot of things we talked about today, and also links off to my socials. And feel free to send me questions. I've got a contact page there too. So if you have questions, I'm happy to answer those too.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you so much for listening and letting me be a part of your day. If you enjoyed this episode or the show in general, please share it with a friend and help me reach more moms around the world. Also, if you find some value in this podcast and would like to help support it, please visit my Ko-fi page. The link is in the show notes. Any contribution is much appreciated. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when a new episode drops. I'll see you next week.